Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a huge mistake to think that the current global economic crisis is just a cyclical inevitability. What's happening right now is not merely the predictable standard volatility that we have come to expect every decade or so from the neoliberal, financialized Western capitalist system. This isn't just part of the normal ebb and flow. It's not something that we just have to endure for a few weeks or a few months or even a few years before it sorts itself out. Anyone who thinks that way is staggeringly out of touch. The way the global economy works is undergoing a structural change. It's crucial for policymakers, particularly in developing economies, to understand this and carve out their own way independently. The owners and controllers of global financialized capital, the 1%, if you will, are undertaking an unprecedented power grab. And without independent planning in the global south and the developing world, we will see entire regions turned into serfdoms. The war in Ukraine is only minimally a military conflict between the Russian army and the Ukrainians. That's the smallest part of this conflict, and those are the smallest and least important players. This is not even a war between Russia and the collective West. This is a war by monopolistic private sector superpowers to subjugate Europe and to enslave the global south, particularly Asia. In part, this is sort of a preemptive corporate response to the demographic collapse of the populations in Europe. They are aging and they are dying rapidly, and more rapidly in Germany and Russia than anywhere else. The only markets of the future are going to be in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, the global south. Understand that the post-World War II global order was premised on the U.S. guaranteeing the economic prosperity of Europe in exchange for Europe siding with the U.S. against Russia, against the Soviet Union. This system stopped making any sense when the USSR ceased to exist, but safeguarding global trade, globalization, continued to be profitable and beneficial throughout at least the 1990s and early 2000s. But during the post-World War II era, the period of globalization, the conventional norms of international politics, diplomacy, and power dynamics shifted, partly due to globalization. What made this change was that you had the emergence of corporate superpowers, you have the radical financialization of the economy, and you have the hyper-accumulation of wealth by an increasingly smaller and smaller number of people. Now today, both Russia and Germany are dying demographically, and half of the EU has already passed the Rubicon of population collapse. The post-World War II order has been an investment of diminishing returns for at least a decade, and the owners and controllers of global financialized capital are abandoning that system. With the European population in rapid decline, the unipolar global superpower of private financialized capital no longer see them as a profitable population. As workers, they can largely be replaced by automation, robotics, and AI, and as consumers, they are very likely to become merely instruments for transferring money from governments to corporations through some form of universal basic income that will be controlled through CBDCs, thus taking the guesswork out of their economic activity, and thus further consolidating market control and monopolization among the biggest players. And war and conflict in Europe will perhaps become the continent's greatest method for contributing to corporate profiteering. Now, the global south, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, they still have robust demographics. Their worker and consumer pools are reliably replenishing. The process of industrialization and general prosperity in the society that occurred in Europe and the West for the last century will likely be replicated in the global south, except this time it will be done under the control and management of existing corporate power, meaning all development will be pursued under the auspices of that power and for the benefit of that power. If leaders in the global south do not recognize this, or if they opt to collaborate with existing financial and corporate institutions, because doing so will bring superficial prosperity at the expense of genuine independence and economic sovereignty, they will deliver their people into subjugation. Jazakumullahu khairan wa assalamu alaikum.